Hey guys, it's QuickyBaby and welcome back to World of Tanks. I'm on the 9.5 test server checking out the Object 260 mod 1945. This is going to be one of the mission reward tanks. It is the final one that you're going to pick up, and it plays quite a lot like an IS-7, but it's more mobile than an IS-7, and it loses that 130mm to get a 122mm IS-4 gun. If this sounds like the vehicle for you, then hang around. I've got some gameplay coming right up after I let you know everything that you need to know about this future tier 10 mission reward tank. So the 260 has 50 less hit points than the IS-7, but it weighs nearly 9 tons less. And this weight difference is amplified by the fact that the vehicle gets 150 extra horsepower on its engine, which does allow the Object 260 to accelerate a hell of a lot faster than its tier 10 IS-7 counterpart. Now the top speed limit on this tank is 60 kilometers an hour, which is a negligible amount higher than the IS-7. And the traverse speed is exactly the same at 28 degrees. Now this is what's surprising. The Object 260 has some very thick armor to go with this mobility. 150 at the front, 150 at the side, but 70 at the rear. When we compare this to the IS-7, it's nearly identical on the hull, apart from the rear armor is thinner on the 260 than the IS-7. But if you expose the side of your tank or the rear of your tank in either of these two vehicles, you're doing it wrong. The pike nose design on these vehicles is designed to be face-hugging its opponents, trying to hide its lower plate, or having them at about this kind of distance where the angle will be too high for them to penetrate. So the turret armor on the IS-7 is mighty. It doesn't really have cupola weak points. And it's 240mm thick at the front, 185 at the side, and 94 at the rear. For the 260, it is 350 at the front, 240 at the side, and 100 at the rear. But don't let this fool you. Let's take a look in Tank Inspector at this in some more detail. So here we have the Object 260. Let's take a look at this 350mm of turret armor. From this angle, the whole of the front is 600 thick, or a ricochet. Wow, ricochet, ricochet, ricochet. The other side is the same. Let's poke the gun down a little bit now and take a look at the upper turret armor. So interestingly enough, this little bit on top of the tank does not actually count as a hitbox. But there is one key difference between the 260 and the IS-7, and that is that the 260 has a cupola on it. If you're able to hit it flush, it has as low as 120mm of armor, and at max 200mm of armor, and this is the key difference between the 260 and the IS-7. The IS-7, as we can see here, doesn't have such a weakness, and overall its turret armor is pretty much immune frontally. But when it comes to the side armor on the 260, we can see it is very thick indeed. It ranges from 280 to 240 in some parts, which is very similar to the IS-7. So even if you've given the enemy the whole of the side of your turret, it's 50-50 rather it's going to go in, even if they're a tier 10 tank. So let's take a look at the hull armor on this vehicle. So from this distance, the lower plate is about 270mm, but if we go further away, it becomes a lot easier to penetrate down to 230. From this distance, the upper plate is 300mm thick, and you'd have to get very lucky to be able to penetrate it. At range, this is amplified even more as the angle increases further. And even if you have the side of the front plate of the 260, it is very thick indeed. You have to be taller than the vehicle, aiming down on it really to have a very good chance. The tank has also got a huge glut of spaced armor in this part of the vehicle, making the armor range between 200 and 376mm. You have to aim below this part where you will go through the side armor, and you only need about 143 to go through at this angle. If you get the side of a 260, you will be able to track it and keep it there with any tank that this vehicle will be able to meet. And so if you want to be effectively tanking with your Object 260, keep the enemies at this kind of distance and keep your turret moving so they can't target your cupola. One thing that I should also mention is the ground resistances on the Object 260 are better than the IS-7. On soft terrain, it is nearly 0.6 of a meter per second better, and on medium terrain, it's 0.1 better. But they both have the same terrain resistance on hard terrain. I'll be looking at this in more detail later on in the video. So let's take a look at the armament on the Object 260, and it's basically the IS-4 gun. But it's better mounted on this vehicle than it is on the IS-4. The rate of fire is 0.22 better. The penetration is slightly better at 260 rather than 258. The accuracy is better by 0.02, and the aim time is massively better at 2.5 seconds. This 122mm on the Object 260 really does feel a bit more like a medium tank gun. And now, while this rate of fire is still far from impressive when you compare it to, for example, the 121, considering the armor that you get, this gun is quickly able to engage its opponents and start taking chunks out of them. In fact, when we compare the 130mm on the IS-7 to the 122mm on the Object 260, the DPM is so much better even though your alpha damage is less. It's also worth mentioning that the standard rounds on the Object 260 are APCR. They will cost you 1,180 credits a shot. Now, APCR ammunition will have less normalization than the AP rounds that are on the IS-7 or on the IS-4, but they do travel to the target quicker. As we can see here, the APCR rounds that the Object 260 fires are 1,259 meters per second velocity. When we compare this to the very slow, derpy 130mm shells that the IS-7 gets, it just feels better at shooting and sniping long-range targets. So apart from that, this vehicle gets a standard 400 meters view range and 26 degrees a second turret traverse speed. All in all, these are some very impressive stats to have on a tier 10 heavy tank. Let's see how it does in some gameplay. But just as a passing mention, I should highlight that the Object 260 has 5 degrees of gun depression, whereas the IS-7 has 6, which will take away a little bit of the flexibility of the gun. So I'm playing on Westfield, and let's use the speed of the Object 260 to get the initial spot for my team. Let's fast forward a little bit for you guys. And there we go. We can see 3 the enemy tier 10 tank destroyers. Got to get out of there in a hurry. Try and turn my tracks. T10E5 gives us a little love bump. So let's get to where we wanted to go. We wanted to be in that C1, C2 area. Unable to hit the AMX-50B there. But this position that you see me going into is a location where I've seen many IS-7s have fantastic games. Considering that the armor profile on this tank is very similar to the IS-7, maybe the Object 260 can have a good game here as well. And there's that gigantic, fat turret of a tank that I reviewed yesterday, and it's gone. There's the IS-7, I really want to hit him. And our ally comes out of nowhere to absorb the shot. Sorry about that one. That was neither my fault nor yours. So again, that FE4005 is just such a gigantic target. But hopefully I'm showing you here the accuracy and the aim time on this vehicle. It certainly doesn't feel like a heavy. Looks like the artillery finally connected with us, but we managed to absorb a shot there from the IS-7. This 50B comes around. Doesn't want to mess with the Object 260. Then a Hesh round from the 4005 hits the vehicle, takes out our loader. We put him back into the fight. And yeah, doesn't matter how thick your armor is, you can't bounce Hesh rounds. Luckily for us, we put a good shot there into the IS-7, and we bounce his returning fire. This 50B is out of position now, and we're able to put a good one into the side of his turret. So the things that I want to highlight are the excellent engine power on this tank. Oh, wow, that shouldn't be a bounce. I guess he was angling his turret to the side, which meant that his machine gun port on top was pretty well angled. But the things that I want to highlight are, check out how fast the aim time is on this vehicle. It's beautiful. Especially with the vertical stabilizers. You're able to quickly engage your targets, put a meaty shot into them, and then pull back. Now we have a Jagdpanzer E100 against us. Trying to find his lower plate, but maybe we can get his friend instead. We bounce off the FE215B 183 turret, and that was a gigantic ammo rack on the IS-7. What an explosion, and even made the screen shake as well. The 183 gets almost one shot by our Conqueror gun carrier, and luckily I avoid the enemy artillery, trying to hide behind this T10E5. So all of my friends that were around me have died, but we've killed a lot of the enemies in the process. I need to hang on against these tank destroyers. You can't miss this gigantic turret, but he can very easily miss us. And even if he was to hit us, the splash would probably only do 400 from the Hess shell. So we've had enough of firing APCR, now we're going to fire a few heat rounds to take out the enemy Jagdpanzer E100. One right into the side of his vehicle there. Now we're just looking how to finish him off. And we put another one into his side. The last man standing is the Object 260. And it did a really good job under pressure. And now check out the mobility of this tank. We need to get back to base to secure it. And this 1,200 brake horsepower engine just simply tears up the ground. So, we miss our first shot. I hesitate about who to focus, but I go for the 1390, and that was a god-awful shot. Luckily for us, however, this Batchat's aiming up at us and missing his shots, going for our lower plate. The one that he finally connects does bounce. And our FV4005 takes him out. Just check out the mobility of this vehicle. Ah! You're not dodging anymore, mate. And so from here on, it's just a case of hunt down the remaining artillery, who our FV takes out the game. So what around for the Object 260 here, I got to highlight a lot of the strengths of the vehicle, the speed and the mobility of it, the quick to aim, accurate, high rate of fire 122mm that's on this tank, and also the incredible protection that you get, capable of pulling off bouncers all over the place. In fact, the only damage that we took in this game was from HE shells, both from the artillery and also from that FV4005, which allowed us to pull off 4,862 damage with 1,045 base experience. We got a Confederate medal as well as 2 kills. We only missed one shot, and I guess that was the one that went into the back of our allies. Sorry about that. We also did 2,400 assistance damage. Our armor blocked 1,850 that game, and this was against a lot of tanks with very high penetration. I can only imagine how this tank is going to do in a standard game of World of Tanks when there are tier 8s and tier 9s that this vehicle will face. So now we're going to do a vehicle traverse speed test. Let's see how the Object 260 does against the IS-7. The Object 260 appears to be faster and finishes with a time of 16.156 for an entire rotation, while the IS-7 finishes in exactly 18 seconds, which means the Object 260 was able to complete a full rotation 10% faster on medium or soft terrain than the IS-7 was. So now we're using the same racetrack that you will have seen in my FV4005 video. We're going to go around this triangle here and see who has the fastest time. Offsets the Object 260. There's some great acceleration on this tank. Combined with a mediocre track traverse, if you were to compare this to a medium tank, means that it still loses some speed in the corners, but that 1,200 horsepower engine is able to quickly accelerate, and it finishes. Now let's take a look at how the IS-7 does, driven by Reza. Thank you so much, Reza, for helping me out with this. And he's off. The IS-7 is a lot slower to accelerate than the Object 260 is. And this means that it takes longer to get up to its top speed, but more importantly, when it has to make turns, and when you turn, you lose speed, unless your track traverse is epic, then it takes the IS-7 even longer to get around than the Object 260. And he's about to finish. And stop. So as we can see, the Object 260 was able to do this track in about 38 to 39 seconds, whereas it takes the IS-7 about 45 seconds to get round. We tried this multiple times and we were always within a second or two of our time. And so there you have it, that was the Object 260. Faster than the IS-7, I'd say it has a better gun than the IS-7, and very comparable armor, apart from one aspect. So while the IS-7 has no weak point on top of its tank, the Object 260 clearly does, as we're going to see here. The IS-7's able to penetrate it and take off a huge proportion of our hit points, which is one thing that the IS-7 definitely has over this vehicle. Whether it's going to be a deal breaker for you, it's up to you to decide, really. For me personally, I would rather have the better performing gun and the increased mobility at the expense of having a weak point on the tank. Remember that as the Object 260 is also a reward tank, it is half a premium. It does not make increased credits. The only benefit that you get by this tank being designated as a premium will be that you can use any Soviet heavy crew in this vehicle. Anyway guys, I hope you enjoyed this review. If you did, please consider giving the video a like down below. It really helps the channel out. And let me know what you think in the comments about the Object 260. Do you think that it's basically just a better IS-7? Or do you think that there are some aspects about the tank that do balance it? Let me know what you guys think. And if you want to know other things coming in the 9.5 patch, I've already done a couple of videos on it and I will be doing a lot more, so think about subscribing and checking them out. Anyway, as always guys, thank you so much for watching. You've been epic and hopefully I'll see you soon.